हेलो अस्सलाम वालेकुम एंड वेलकम टू द फिफ्थ एपिसोड ऑफ बट्टा फास्ट। मैं हूं इमरान अकवी, मेरे साथ उस्मान समीउद्दीन। एपिसोड शुरू करने से पहले दो चीज़ें। सबसे पहले तहे दिल से हम दोनों मुबारकबाद देने चाहते हैं उन भारतीय भाइयों को, और वो भाई होते हैं जिनको बहुत शिद्दत से तकलीफ थी कि हमारी अभी तक तमाम एपिसोड्स इंडिया के खिलाफ स्पेल्स हैं। तो आज हम इंडिया के खिलाफ स्पेल नहीं करने वाले। और दूसरी चीज ये है कि ये हम एपिसोड एक दफा रिकॉर्ड कर चुके हैं, मगर उस दौरान उस्मान खुद ही बताएंगे उनका माइक भी नहीं काम कर रहा था, और मेरे घर के बाहर लग रहा था कि कोई ओलंपिक्स हो रहा है सायरन बजाने का। पूरी दुनिया भर के लोग सायरन बजा रहे थे। सो फॉर दोज हु कंप्लेन अबाउट द साउंड, वी हैव रिकॉर्डेड दिस ए सेकंड टाइम बिकॉज वी रियली लव यू एंड हेट आवर ओन लाइव्स। Usman, please tell the audience which spell we're discussing today and why your mic wasn't working.
My mic wasn't working. Hello everyone, my mic wasn't working because I had put the wrong end of the lead into the wrong end of the device. I just couldn't for the life of me work
This is
out
not a
why.
euphemism.
Yeah, it's not a euphemism. It was completely a very stupid mistake. And so we recorded this whole. The thing about that episode is, by the way, guys, that 20 years from now, when we're even more famous and rich and popular than we are now, those tapes will come out. They'll be like the lost recordings of the best podcast you ever heard. And that will be like, it'll be like pure gold then. Everyone will be like, यार वो तुम्हें episode याद है बट्टा फास की? नहीं, वो नहीं जो उन्होंने record करके publish करी थी,
The
जो
bootleg.
original थी उसकी, because that had all the gold in it. So the spell we're doing, I don't know why it wasn't the first spell we did ever, Ahmed, given that we've grown up probably our entire lives talking about it. It's, of course, Wasim Akram's spell in the final of the 1992 World Cup against the other great enemy that I'm sure will be featuring a lot, our colonial masters, one-time colonial masters, England. The 3 for 49 of 10 with no maidens, with a gazillion no balls and wides. And in particular, of course, the two balls that kind of turn the game around completely. And yeah, I was saying, Emma, as a way into this conversation, I think before we get into like the nitty-gritty of the spell, like I do feel like I've been talking about the spell like literally my entire life. I've spoken about this spell more than I speak about my daughters, more than I speak about my family, more than I speak about like my age, more than I speak about living in like London and it being difficult and miserable, about the weather. More than any of that, I feel like जब से मैं 15 साल का था जिस दिन वो स्पेल हुआ था अब तक, यानी 30 साल हो गए हैं माशाल्लाह, मैं हर दिन मैंने या तो सोचा है उस स्पेल के बारे में या किसी से कुछ there's been some reference to that spell. It is just like, I think, that iconic Pakistani spell, right, for many reasons.
I mean, I think इसीलिए शायद पहली एपिसोड नहीं थी, right? Because like it's way too obvious कि आप ये वाली स्पेल कर रहे हैं. And something I was thinking about, जब ने the bootleg version में नहीं है, so you're missing out on that. But कि अभी we brought this up. I brought this up a few times because I was covering it live, the World Cup final for football, and I was talking about like what Kylian Mbappe did in that, and the hat trick he scores, and we talked about like compared it to Shoaib Akhtar's wickets in India was sorry to our Indian friends, जब उसने सचिन और द्रविड को आउट किया था. The thing that I talked about that Mbappe one and on air as well is that like it's not even like a teenager fantasy. It's like एक बच्चे छोटे से 7-8 साल के बच्चे की fantasy, right? कि like you walk into a World Cup that your team is losing and boom 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 you score a hat trick against the greatest player in the world, or former greatest player in the world now that you've stepped on the field. Like that's a child's kind of dream. In this case, in the Wasim spell, I am that child. Like I'm 8 years old. Mere, or I think this is a huge part of that World Cup's lore is that in Pakistan at least, क्योंकि ऑस्ट्रेलिया न्यूजीलैंड में हो रहा था, सुबह के वक्त मैचेस होते थे, बट उस वक्त रमजान, तो लोग उस टाइम पे जाग रहे थे. अब मैं रोजे नहीं निकालते 8 साल की उम्र पे, और मैं आई डोंट रिमेम्बर वेकिंग अप एट सेडी, बट आई डेफिनेटली रिमेम्बर बीइंग अप फॉर मैचेस. आई स्पेसिफिकली रिमेम्बर कि जब पाकिस्तान ऑल आउट हुआ था 72 वर्सेस इंग्लैंड एंड बारिश हो रही थी, एंड इवेंचुअली इतनी बारिश हुई थी कि पाकिस्तान मतलब वी बोथ गॉट अ पॉइंट ईच, एंड दैट एंडेड अप क्रूशियल इन keeping us in that World Cup. I specifically remember that I was playing out a fantasy while the rain break was going on कि मतलब मैं पाकिस्तान टीम के लिए खेलता हूँ और हम 72 बना के आउट हुए हैं और अब इंग्लैंड की बैटिंग है और मैंने कोई 8-9 विकेट ली थी. So I'm at that age in my life, right? Like I think these like naive enough to think these things happen. और उसके बाद and I've like this story, I've tweeted about this. It's a very long story, but I'll try and tell it very quickly, which is that because my family wasn't really into cricket, so I was sent to school that day. And I was one of like 25 kids out of 200 who showed up. So
This is for the final, right? The final
this is for
itself
the
now.
final. This is for the World Cup final. And then the teachers decide there's no point in teaching classes. So they put all the children inside the library and put the match on. And even in this match, like, when I look back at it now, Pakistan's playing terribly. And like older me would watch a match like this, just dying of stress and hating myself. But young me had no idea. And most of the kids there had no idea. तो वो मैच लगा है, जावेद मियां और इमरान खान बैटिंग कर रहे हैं, बस वो आउट नहीं हो रहे और हम लोग शोर मचा रहे हैं, खुश हो रहे हैं, खुश हो रहे हैं. And then the teachers are like, चुप हो जाए, चुप हो जाए, चुप हो जाए. We're still making sure. The teachers are worried, like, oh shit, we're losing control of this. And like Miss Shahnaz, जो मेरी क्लास टीचर थी, वो at some point like, आप लोग चुप नहीं होंगे तो मैं टीवी बंद कर दूंगी. Like,
एक मिनट. Shout out to Miss Shahnaz here, but can there be a more Pakistani teacher name? Shahnaz? I don't think so. Shout out though. Well done for raising
that
everyone
is
up
all
what
the
he is.
every cliche exists in this cliche, right? Like this is the origin myth of millennial Pakistanis. तो होता ये है कि मिस शहनाज वो करती हैं, फिर कोई चौका पड़ जाता है और हम लोग फिर से शोर मचा रहे होते हैं, मिस शहनाज टीवी बंद कर देते हैं. मे भी चौका नहीं पड़ा था, बॉल बाय बॉल है, लोग आके मेरा दिमाग खराब करेंगे. बट पॉइंट इज मिस शहनाज ने टीवी बंद कर दिया. एंड वी आर ऑल क्वाइट, वी आर लाइक, अभी तक आप स्कूल आए हैं और सीधा आप टीवी देख रहे हैं. you're like, this is the greatest day of our lives. But now when the TV is shut, like the possibility of normalcy and the mundane experience of life is coming back, तब थोड़ी सा भी फट रही है ना कि एक हम लोग ने prisoners dilemma, we all kind of reach a consensus कि अच्छा ठीक है अब सब चुप रहेंगे, ठीक है, ताकि मैच तो देख सके. Miss Shahnaz puts the TV back on, and Javed Miadad is walking back into the pavilion. He's gotten out while the TV was off. और Miss Shahnaz टीवी देखते हैं और वो फुल आंसुओं से रो रही हैं और बाकी टीचर कहते हैं, शहनाज तुम्हारी गलती नहीं है, तुम्हारी गलती नहीं है. Obviously,
Javed Mirdad का reverse sweep आपकी गलती नहीं थी, Miss Shahnaz. Javed Mirdad would have played that reverse sweep anyway.
But in that moment, Miss Shahnaz is just like, because I think this is something to just, उस लम्हे में पाकिस्तान पहली दफा फाइनल खेल रहा था. उससे पहले 3 लगातार वर्ल्ड कप्स में सेमीफाइनल हार चुका था, इंक्लूडिंग 87 when everyone thought we were playing at home. We were probably the second, if not tied, best side in the world, and we lose that. So Miss Shahnaz is carrying that weight on her shoulders. She's just like, like Mia Dada out of me. And again, the context of the match, that was good. Pakistan then kind of kick on and make a good total, etc. Magar Mia Dada out ho gaya, Miss Shahnaz ro rahi hai wo. So when I went home, I already had, for an 8-year-old, by far the most wildest day I'd ever experienced.
Did you watch the whole match at school and then go home?
No, so we get sent home like by 1:30, whatever. So I think us waqt tak lunch innings break ho chuki.
Okay.
So then we get home and then I watch this, and I'm pretty sure I missed the opening spells, but I like what Wasim Akram does. For an 8-year-old, you're just like, okay, so this is how life happens. कि थोड़ा सा बीच में adversity होती है, and then Wasim Akram shows up and saves the day. Great, problem solved. And like I think it took, मतलब that was the problem with it. I was that child who believed this insane thing, and maybe surviving Pakistan में जरूरी था कि आप ऐसी crazy किस्म की hope अपने दिल में रखें, but it was the most fantastical thing to witness. And probably I was at the right age to witness it, because like, and for, the older you get, like the more kind of nuance and cynicism comes into it. What was your experience like of watching this?
यार सबसे पहली बात तो I cannot believe you had to go to school. Like, I mean, that's like, social services को बुलाएं यार. Your parents have like a lot to answer for that you had. And then there were 25 other kids who were at school.
Yeah, these are pretty burger schools.
This was a Wednesday यार. Midweek कुछ नहीं होता है स्कूल में. सबको मालूम है कि midweek is like, चलो यार खत्म करो इस दिन को. I'm pretty sure it was a Wednesday because
yeah.
Although that strikes me as weird, by the way, if you think about it
It's
now.
bizarre the World Cup final was on a Wednesday in the Australian winter, yeah, late summer.
Yeah, or also end of Australian summer. But yeah,
Yeah,
that is actually, I've never thought about it. It was a Wednesday. Like, why the hell would you have a World Cup final on a Wednesday?
yeah.
Like, that's like basic broadcasting 101, right? शोएब नबीज को बुलाएं, उनसे कहें कि एक दो चपेड़ मारे कहीं पे, इन लोग को आप किस तरह की
I
प्रोग्रामिंग कर
mean,
रहे हैं?
अगर ये अभी point आप उठाए ये तो should point out that it's really like the 92 World Cup is the first one that really caters to modern television, right? Like इससे पहले Kerry Packer वगैरह में हुआ था, but the 92 one is where you have colored kits, where you have night
They
matches,
had satellite TV, right? So they could
it's
beam out
satellite
to
TV.
the world.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think 96 is when cricket becomes very different. The World Cup becomes very different. But
Yeah.
I think that the fact that 92 is a pioneer in a lot of things, which is, I think, outside of Pakistan's fairy tale when लोगों को इसलिए भी याद रहता है. But also, I think ये point gets on a Wednesday speaks to the fact that there was still a lot of bullshit. Like that cricket didn't really know how to sell
100%.
World Cup,
100%.
particularly to a TV audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which now it's unimaginable, but you know that was where we were. But yeah, you were saying what was
So
your experience of
So, you know,
watching?
we I was in Jeddah at the time. I was like
I'm
15.
sorry to hear that.
It was like GCSE years, kind of. I'm trying to remember. So, you know, there was a little bit of कि यार कुछ करना है जिंदगी के साथ. You start thinking okay, GCSEs are in your face, so then you have to kind of make career choices and decide what you want to do, which is ridiculous at that age. But anyway, and so we went to actually what the one friend who we were all this like desi cricket playing group at a very international school. And we went to one guy's house who had a dish. And so we went to his place at like 4 in the morning. It must have been in Saudi at that time, I think, and watched it as a group. And it was phenomenal. Like, you know, for the most part, uh, like I think the most nervous time we had was when Imran and Javed were batting, because we were really like, what are you guys doing? Like, you know, this is one, it's really boring. And two, like you're literally losing us this game. You know, Imran was dropped by Gooch. That would have been terrible. Mirdad was struggling with stomach cramps and stuff. And you were like, what are you guys doing? Of course, that part of the innings played out perfectly. But then when Wasim came on, and I distinctly remember this feeling, and had been kind of built up over a period of time, is that Wasim will do it. He will sort this out for us. Up at least a total rag dein, Wasim will sort it out for us, because at that time he was just kind of emerging from the shadow of Imran over that late 80s, kind of early 90s period. Imran, you know, had kind of finished effectively as a cricketer by then. Batting Imran ki thi, but bowling was gone. Wasim had stepped up across the late 80s and early 90s as the guy, as the go-to guy. उस जमाने में clutch वच की कोई बात नहीं करता था. It was just that, you know, ये एक player है जो pressure handle कर लेता है. And Wasim had proven that time and again. Australasia Cup ke final mein, just before that, he had hit a 49 and taken a hat trick against Australia to win it. 88 series against West Indies, he was prominent in that throughout the series. And the Nehru Cup final, when he came out and just like hit a six of the only ball he faced in the final, which happened to be the second last ball of that final, off Viv Richards, no less, who, you know, he was a batter, of course, but could bowl decent off spin, very more than decent off spin. And so, you know, the guy was like becoming this clutch figure. And so we thought, yeah, final में आ गया है, Wasim का tournament जिस तरह का भी गया है, he will perform. Like we will bank our hopes on him and he will not let us down. It was, you know, you're 15, you're still kind of on the cusp of becoming an adult, so you still retain faith and optimism in things. Like, you're not a cynic like I am now. You retain faith and hope and optimism. So you thought Wasim kar lega kuch na kuch. And, you know, then of course he got Botham out, which wasn't out. Like, you know, we say that to this day कि वो गलत से out दिया, मगर legally गलत out दिया, मगर morally और spiritually एकदम सही out दिया था उसे. Like, I think
Fuck
ethically,
ain't
morally,
Botham,
spiritually.
first.
What's that?
Fuck ain't Botham, first of all.
Basically. And you know, Botham had a great tournament as well up until then. He was having like a late career swan song at the forefront of this very German-like efficient England team full of all-rounders. Like uske 1 से 11 tak all-rounders hi the. And they were showing a new way forward for white ball cricket. A great side, actually, arguably one of their greatest sides until like this current generation in white ball. And then, you know, Wasim gets that first wicket and you're like, okay, you know, Wasim's getting there. And I had never bought into this like narrative through that tournament कि Wasim bowling somehow अच्छी नहीं करा रहा था. Like people were like worried about Wasim ke yaar wo wides or no balls bahut zyada kara raha hai. And I was like, man, like the point of cricket at that stage was that he has to get wickets. And he was picking up wickets throughout that tournament. He had 15 wickets before he got to the final, which out of like 8-9 games in an ODI, I think was a pretty good rate. You know, wides kara raha tha wo, but Imran had said to him that, you know, screw, forget all this, just bowl fast. So he was bowling well as far as I was concerned. And you know, then what he did, we'll get into now. But yeah, my feelings were that Wasim has got this. And that was built up over 3 or 4 years of Wasim constantly getting this. You know, like Pakistan in trouble, Wasim Akram there to help you out. And he will do it because he was just, it was a wonderful, wonderful time in Wasim's career and of being a Wasim fan. Because he literally at that stage, I can't remember one thing that he ever did wrong. He even appeared in like anti-smoking adverts, man, which like, come on, dude. Like, come on.
I mean, एक तो this we should definitely come back to वसीम भाई आप थकते नहीं हैं. That deserves its own segment. मगर जो अभी यहाँ पे बात हो रही है कि like I was just thinking about this. You know, you were saying you're 15 at this point, so I was 16 when we played the 99 World Cup final. You know, and so by that time, like it's clearly
That's why you're like this.
And that was the thing, right? Okay, unlike you, who at that point from like whatever 8 to like 15 had seen Wasim be absolutely golden, I had started at his peak. And so then like all the revolts against him, the fixing, the mystery disappearance in the Bangalore quarterfinal in 1996, whatever else you want to throw at that, like उसके बावजूद भी मेरा ईमान उतना ही पक्का था. And I find like 99 was, for you know, it was a moment where like for a lot of people एक आपकी थी कि okay, who am I if Wasim Akram can't win a World Cup final, what do I believe in anymore? Like, you know, कि this मेरा ईमान कहाँ जाएगा, मैं क्या मानता हूँ इस दुनिया में. I think like that was because what you saw in that World Cup final, it was just like every time that he failed, वो होता था कि हाँ यार ठीक है, मतलब आज ये अंपायर बेमान था या मौसम सही नहीं था या ये था या wasn't a big occasion. And 96, I don't know, I had like a million different justifications कि वसीम अकरम ने quarter final क्यों खेला. And like on the plus side, it kind of, you know, at least वसीम वर्सेस वकार डिबेट में था कि ये लो भाई तुम्हारा वकार, like वकार के बगैर वसीम won World Cup, but वसीम के बगैर वकार couldn't even stop Ajay Jadeja, which is unfair. And we can get into that.
Well, unfair is relative.
But
Depending on which side of Wasim Wakar you sit on, unfair is relative.
yeah, and I think कि वहां पे बात फिर ये भी आ जाती है ना कि अब हम लोग यहाँ बैठ के 1.25 घंटे बात कर रहे हैं एक स्पेल के बारे में, तो शायद we can talk about like nuance, but like in so many of these things, it is those big moments that everyone remembers, right? Like at least जो मुझे स्पोर्ट्स के बारे में सबसे अच्छी बात लगती है कि हम सब मिलके एक चीज एक्सपीरियंस कर रहे हैं एक साथ, और उसमें हम सबको याद भी वही चीजें रहती हैं which are the biggest headlines. And I
Yep.
think, you know, Imran definitely had that knack, but Wasim for sure has that ability to kind of show up for big games. And you know, I again, like बहुत सारे लोग आपको दे देंगे नहीं 94 में ये हुआ था or whatever, I don't give a fuck. Point is कि in terms of like those big memories, Wasim owned all those big memories.
Yeah. He's like, if you go through, and we will, like, I promise we will get to the spell right after this. But if you go through all of Pakistan's like greatest moments from about like, you know, the latish mid to late 80s up to, I would say, like even the end of the 90s, like Wasim has been prominent in all of them. West Indies ke khilaf, Tino series home and away. His record was outstanding in those series, like, you know, saved them in that right from the first series in 86 when he took a 6 for hit 60 in one of the test matches, then 88 May when he roughed up Viv Richards of all the goddamn people, and then 90 May he took wickets along with Wakar in that one also. He was prominent right throughout that. He was right at the forefront of the 92 win over England, you know, one of the greatest 5-test series. I think easily the greatest 5-test series Pakistan have ever played. You know, that entire tour when they won the Tetley Challenge and stuff, Wasim was right up there. 99 ke World Cup mein, he was prominent all the way through to the final. The only tri-series win Pakistan have had in Australia Wasim Akram was captain. By the way, like a hugely underappreciated triumph, but Wasim was captain of that side. 88, 89, when they got to the final of the Tri-Series, he was there, Nehru Cup, Australasia Cup, everywhere. So like Wasim is the very definition of clutch. And I know there's people out there who will say, hey, there's no such thing as clutch, but I'm telling them to F off because this guy was clutch, right? This guy really turned up at those big moments and he performed exactly as you hoped and expected and wished that he would. So yeah, Wasim, clutch. Now we come to the spell, and I'm going to start this off, like, you know, that by pointing out something that we again take for granted because we've grown up with that spell, but it was something that Jared actually, and it took an outsider almost into the experience to kind of point it out. He says that, you know, that like that the Wasim Akram's whole thing, his left arm thing, some people reduce him to being like a great reverse swing bowler, which is absolute crap. He's much more than that, always has been. And the thing about Wasim was that he was, and this is how the outside world remembers him, is that he was a pioneering bowler. You know, Wasim se pehle left arm fast bowlers बहुत कम थे. Successful left arm fast bowlers cricket में और भी कम थे. Like, you know, there was maybe Alan Davidson as an all-rounder back in the 50s and 60s. But successful, long-lasting left arm fast bowlers of his genius were absolutely like hardly anybody there, you know. And so Wasim was primarily a pioneering thing in cricket, like an innovation almost. And then the deliveries to Alan Lamb and Chris Lewis, right? That first ball to Alan Lamb is a ball, even though Neil Fairbrother, who had been playing with Wasim at Lancashire all this time, had kind of warned Alan Lamb about this delivery. Okay, what's he doing? And, you know, Fairbrother told him that he's going to bring it in, he's going to angle it in and take it away. Alan Lamb's like, yeah, sure. You know, probably says something like, I got this. Don't worry. It's fine. And then when you come down, like, it's one thing knowing what he's going to do, but then to be able to play that delivery, still to this day, it's a timeless delivery. It's impossible to play that ball. You may have seen it being bowled by guys like, I don't know, Mitchell Stark, who had to hit a crack to bowl James Vince in an Ashes like that. You may have seen Zahir Khan bowl it every now and again. Mohammad Amir bowled some deliveries like that, which caught the outside edge rather than the off stump. But to this day, 30 years on, somebody bowls a ball like that between 85, 90 miles per hour, it is still a great ball. Like, it's unplayable, whatever era you're in. And Wasim was doing it then, and batters had not seen it that often. And even if they had, they couldn't do anything about it. So that delivery is like just, it's spectacular, it's innovative, it's pioneering, and it's unplayable. Like
I
for
think
that day, for that time.
ये बात
Yeah.
you said in the last right now as well, right? कि Wasim is a really complete bowler, not just a reverse swing, etc. मगर ये बात बिल्कुल दुरुस्त है क्योंकि एक तो वसीम से पहले there's almost, as you said, like other than one or two names, there's no great left arm fast bowler in cricket as such. और वसीम के बाद से आपके पास एक एक लाइन लगी हुई है, ये सारे जो अभी नाम लिए हैं are all excellent elite bowlers, and like so that's not just कि पाकिस्तान में आपने कोई चीज बदली जहां पे आपके पास you had Mohammad Amir, you had Shaheen Shah right now, etc. You had your whole bunch of left arms, but you literally changed the global game. And that's a huge level of impact. और दूसरा कि वही जो बात कि Alan Lamb is probably like, I got this, is because up until that moment जो जिस दुनिया में हम रहते थे उसमें ऐसी अगर कोई ट्राई भी करता बॉल करना है तो उसका मतलब ये था कि वो इस तरफ से आएगी बॉल और सीधी नहीं होगी, स्लाइटली डिविएट टू वन वे बिकॉज नोबडी हैज दैट लेवल ऑफ स्किल सेट. जब वो एक्चुअल बॉल आती है तो उसकी जबरदस्त चीज ये है कि एलन लैम की मूछे 9 बजे हैं और उसकी मलेट 12 बजे है. लाइक लाइक उसका पूरा जिस्म टेढ़ा मेढ़ा होके वो it's insane. And I think that's the other thing about how crazy it is कि आप अगर इतनी फिर निकाल भी रहे हैं तो edge wedge निकालने, like he still also managed to hit the wickets, which means he's done enough कि Alan Lamb's made space and then it's come back and it's stayed, like he's kept it full enough and it's whatever. And this is what the guy does, like just walks in and does it. And I was thinking about this, like आज इमरान खान की अरेस्ट का वारंट निकला है, and in a lot of ways like Imran Khan's political career starts with these two deliveries, right? Like had Imran Khan lost this World Cup final, knows, right? But I mean, but the other thing is not just his political career in terms of the fame, मगर इमरान खान की जो शुरू से था कि कि पाकिस्तान का यूथ और उसमें टैलेंट बहुत है, एंड इट जस्ट नीड्स एप्लीकेशन एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा. What I find interesting about this is that this isn't Imran necessarily talking about himself, because like Imran himself says this from a cricketing point of view, that when he makes it to the team, he's too early, and he doesn't have the skills, and he has to work really, really, really hard to just be at the level that he ends up being at. When he's describing a young person that you just pluck out, and वो आते ही उसमें बहुत ज्यादा talent है और आपको बस उसे थोड़ा direction देनी है, and he can become a world beater, it feels like he's talking about Wasim Akram. Like the vision for the youth that Tehreek-e-Insaf and Imran Khan have had is feels like, when you look at like this main youth that was in Imran's life,
Yeah,
Imran's in his mid-30s, Wasim's in his teens when they start playing together.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
this is exactly the kind of archetype that Imran then believes, okay, fine, if I can do this with Wasim, I can do this with 180 million people. Actually, I think was our population at that point. Like, I think that's, obviously it's not just that Pakistan won that World Cup and whatever, and obviously in that World Cup as well, it was Inzi also, and it was Mushtaq also, other youngsters that he backs. But really, it's like in its most sublime expression, because he'd been experienced, he's been doing that with, it was because he had success mentoring Wasim that he's also had success with like all these other people. And it culminates, and that's why it's so poetic. It's none other than Wasim who kind of caps off these last few years of his career and Javed's career in a sense, and really that era of Pakistan cricket with those two deliveries. Like, its impact is not just on like cricket key skill sets, but also Pakistani politics.
Yeah, and with the fullest expression of the genius that Imran had always said that he had, right? A genius that Imran always felt that he himself did not have. But this guy, and we're not going to go into the fact that it wasn't Imran who discovered Wasim, but we're happy to stick with that story. बेचारे जावेद भाई हमेशा इस पे मार खाते हैं कि यार actually he was the guy who picked Wasim and backed him, and his earliest battles he fought for Wasim. And Gordon Wasim, to his credit, always kind of recognizes that as well. But yeah, I think the key thing with Imran and Wasim was that mentoring, right? And for all the talent that Wasim had, for all his ability to produce that kind of delivery, he always acknowledged, and he did it. And it's an under noted aspect of his career is that he worked damn hard for it. Like he worked like a goddamn dog. Or Imran ne, one of the first things Imran said to him when he had a lot of time with him which was on the 87 tour of England. 5 test series. They're there for like 3 months. Imran is in his element because he's in his other home, maybe his true home. He's going around partying and playing cricket and winning series and also partying. Or Wasim ko apne saath le jata tha Imran everywhere. He was growing him up he was literally kind of bringing him up as an adult into the world. He got Wasim his first club contracts, county contracts, took him out to nightclubs. So Wasim learned about life outside of a cricket field. But the one thing that he drove home to him all the time, which I think stayed with Wasim, was that you just have to work damn hard. You've got this amazing gift, and you cannot let it go to waste. You cannot let it control you. You have to work hard enough to be able to harness and control that gift that you have. And I think that that is something that never left Wasim. So Wasim was in the nets all the time, trying new things, never shirked, bowling long spells, and just working hard. And so it's one of the things that gets forgotten about Wasim is that, as well as the ridiculous gifts that he had to be able to bowl that lamb ball, is that he worked goddamn hard for it to be able to do that. It's not just that he came up and he turned his arm over or nikal gayi. He worked damn hard for it.
मगर ये I think ये बात, it's interesting that you're saying this, क्योंकि and yes, I do, I feel nicer if it's true for Wasim, but in general हम जो घर पे बैठ के देख रहे होते हैं तो हम कहते हैं यार ये एफर्ट नहीं कर रहा, वो नहीं कर रहा. कोई भी जो इंटरनेशनल लेवल स्पोर्ट खेल रहा है, वो जितनी मतलब कंपेयर टू आप अपनी जॉब पे कितनी मेहनत करते हैं, वो उससे कोई 100 गुना ज्यादा कर रहा है. Just to be like the shittiest player on that field, you have to work extremely hard. It's really something beyond like most people's kind of comprehension. So there's no doubt about that. That being said, I feel okay. Like एक मुझे याद है हम लोग हमेशा कहते हैं कि ना वसीम भाई आई बेट वार्म अप नहीं करते, क्योंकि लगता है पहले 2-3 ओवर ही इज यूजिंग टू जस्ट वार्म अप के लिए, क्योंकि वाइडे पे वाइडे नो बॉल ये वो. और इस मैच में लाइक इट्स स्पेशली नाउ, लाइक cricket has changed so much. Okay, at that era, it was like expected, not just with Pakistan, but West Indies as well, the two like best pace attacks, ये दबा के wide no ball कराएंगे, but ये विकेट शिकते लेते हैं, तो ठीक है. So expectations, but still, cricket for the in the pandemic did the ball by ball of this match, and in his opening 5 over spell, Wasim has 5 wides, 3 no balls, and another 5 leg side wides that are not given, and like massive leg side wides, not आजकल की leg
Yeah.
side wide के वो leg stumpness कर रही है, like huge leg side wides,
Uh-huh.
and I feel in that sense because he was so good that anytime he did something that was like even it felt like maybe he was just injured for Bangalore, right? But you're just like Wasim can't, like Wasim injured and on a wheelchair can still bowl out India, like so you have this
It's
expectation कि bro ये तो इतना अच्छा है कि ये जिंदा भी आ जाए ना तो दूसरी टीम को हरा देगा, which I think kind of the skill level at some level, if not कि मेहनत नहीं कर रहा, I definitely always felt that everything comes really easily for Wasim. It was hard to see when he was really having to hustle because
mm.
just for somebody like me कि मतलब ये देखने में भी hot है, इसके बाल, इसकी chain, इसका style, इसकी bowling, like
It's because he made the really impossible things look so
yes,
easy and
yes.
so regular. He did it so regularly, right? So that Alan Lamb ball, if you ask me for a personal list of 10 favorite Wasim Akram balls, 10 of the craziest balls that he's bowled, Alan Lamb delivery would probably be like in the lower half of that list. I can pick off like 6 or 7 balls that I feel personally are better than what he bowled, but because he did it so often, that you just felt like हाँ यार ये एक बार कर सकता है तो फिर हमेशा करेगा, and he used to do it all the time.
So we went, जब हम आमिर वाली spell की बात कर रहे थे, तो that was one of the things, right? कि वो those deliveries aren't Amir's best deliveries or even the best versions. Like Shaheen does a better impression of that
Mm.
5 years later, right? Like but obviously वो moment ऐसा था, वो लम्हा ऐसा था कि आपको याद रहता है और celebrate करते हैं. Like with Wasim, it's like if you want to just take the moment कि World Cup final के 35th over में आपने आके consecutive ले ली, even if you take those with like he drags on those deliveries या कोई wicket पे गिर जाता है, like you'd still go crazy, right? Back to back wickets.
Yeah.
Because the moment is so big. But then he also does it with like crazy skill. But then he also does it that one is going away and the other is coming preposterously. But then, that's what I mean. Like for a child, it's when you watch someone do all of this shit at 8, and as you keep growing older and you realize every level of how impossible that was, it's very difficult to see that person as like fallible, right? Because it's just like, bro, us din to tumne ye kar diya tha. So, like
अब
anything's
क्या कर
possible for
सकते
you.
हो? So I was going to make the point that I was going to make two slightly contentious points about those deliveries, right? One is that I don't think the Alan Lamb dismissal was pure reverse, right? Although it's framed as reverse swing, I feel like it's something more than reverse, and that comes from this space where I've constantly felt that Wasim Akram gets reduced to being just a reverse swing specialist in a lot of the discussions around him. Yes, he was a great reverse swing bowler, but he was much, much, much more than that.
Yeah,
And I feel like so.
this is basically like you saying the favorite biryani that my nani ever made that I enjoyed, you think was a pulao, not a biryani. Like,
Look, that has to be a lie because neither do I love biryani nor am I a great fan of pulao. So, like, that's not going to happen, right? I'm saying
Swat,
that
like,
this
can
delivery.
you restrict yourself to one offensive opinion at a time? Like,
So the lamb ball, I like was not reverse swing. That's or it wasn't entirely reverse swing, or it was more than reverse swing. I have this big thing, Wasim ko ye log reduce karte hain कि वो सिर्फ reverse swing नहीं. This ball was something else, and you just have to watch it, right? I know it's the 35th over, but there's 2 new balls here. So, it's only really 17 overs old. So it's still a brand new ball, yeah. Like it's a kookaburra or whatever they were using then. It's still a brand new ball. And what the things that it does, okay, it does swing in. But I reckon that's more the angle.
I feel that ball was as brand new as every millionaire's son is self-made. Like Pakistani just
Yeah,
17
World Cup final में आप
17
tamper
over
नहीं कर सकते हैं, ठीक है? Steve Buckner
shut
खड़ा
shut
हुआ था
मार
वहां पे.
चुके.
Steve Buckner was there. He would have been keeping an eagle eye on Pakistan. So it does come in, but I feel like that comes in with the arm and the angle generally. And then after that, what it does is it seams away. That ball is like cutting away. It's like a fast leg break. It is literally what, like, I don't know if Wasim does it because the replays weren't great at that time, but agar aap ye kare, to ball aise land karke aise niklegi. So what he does is he's actually like, that ball is breaking away. It's not straightening. It's like it's hit that crack, except the crack that Mitchell Stark hit, except that there's no crack here. It's just Wasim's genius. And that pitch, it wasn't a crazy pitch. There wasn't like, there was a bit of seam and swing early on that Derek Pringle also exploited. Bichara Pringle, like, his greatest performance will be reduced to like a footnote in Wasim Akram's fifth greatest triumph or whatever. But that ball is, the genius of that ball is the length and then the fact that it cuts away. So I'm not convinced it's like 100% that it's reverse. And my other contentious opinion is that Chris Lewis ball after it isn't actually a great ball.
Is not a what?
It's not a great ball. And so I'm
please expand on this.
I'm picking up this mic and I'm dropping it gently. So that's
Mike, it's a blessing that it's working right now. But secondly, please explain why it wasn't a good ball.
Okay. So of course it was a good ball because it got somebody out in a World Cup final, got like a top class elite athlete out in the World Cup final. Of course it is a good ball, but my issue with it is that it's played on, right? And that's a cheat. A played on is like in a mental maths test, you used a calculator and we're like, yeah, and you put the answer down and you pretend that your mental maths mein bahut top class ke koi Miss Shanaz would have noticed something like this and like, just killed it in its infancy. It's a good ball, of course, not least because it drags in so much. But if I ever get the chance, I'm going to ask Wasim whether that ball he intended to bowl fuller, because what it was doing was meant to be a delivery that goes fuller and right into his toes maybe. But somehow, I don't know whether it's his groin that's been bothering him or just the fact that he's on this high or the fact that he's Wasim and like, plans don't always come off with 100% accuracy, but they're still good enough to finish everything else off, is that it actually lands further back than he plans and it's missing the stumps. So if he had left that ball, Chris Lewis, if he had simply left that ball, and back then it wasn't such a sin to leave a ball in a white ball game, it would have gone over the stumps. But he plays it, he hits it, and the aesthetics of it. No, hear me out. The aesthetics of it are all wrong because Wasim Akram does not deserve played-ons off the inside edge of a bat of a ball that's not going to hit the stumps. Wasim Akram's greatest moment deserves to be inch perfect, missile tailing into your toe Yorker, which swings in, hits your toe, makes you fall over, and either gets you out LBW or breaks the stumps. It does not deserve to come in off the inside edge of a really bad, crappy defensive shot from an all-rounder who was like the 107th in line to be Bosom's next replacement. That's my point.
I feel like it's like, कि आप किसी को कहें कि I love you और वो बोले actually you're evolutionary wired and your dopamine and oxytocin cortisol whatever, like it's just like shut the fuck up bro. Like, you completely missed the point. A B कि ये कह रहे हैं कि भाई वो लीव कर सकता था कौन माई का लाल फर्स्ट बॉल वसीम अकरम ने अभी एक क्रेजी विकेट ली है बॉल कोई 6.5 फुट अंदर आ रही है 90 माइल per hour पे and it's like yeah I'm gonna leave this like I feel pretty confident about leaving this. It's I mean come on man, like you're making it sound like it was like a wide off stump and he was like reverse paddling it and he hit his own
it was going to go over the stumps by a foot.
It was going to kiss the bales or something, if not that. But like the point of it is also he's just bowled a delivery that went away from a crazy angle, and now he throws it out like so wide, and then it's basically like watching an off spinner. And so maybe this is what you're getting at, is that these deliveries, reverse or seam or whatever the hell, they're so crazy that they actually make more sense as spinners deliveries, except they're happening at high pace. Like,
I think like, the only like I said, so my aesthetic issue is that inside edge, and I never like those because those balls are not hitting the stumps. That is the batter's ineptitude that is helping that ball hit the stumps. One, and two, it's just not the best self of the ball that Wasim Akram should have bowled at that moment. That's what I'm saying. It is like that ball should have been. Remember the ball to Robert Croft that was never given out? that crazy ball that Mervyn Kitchen doesn't give out. This should have been one of those kind of deliveries that homes in and it swings like 3 different ways, either beats him heads up, toes up or whatever, hits him on the pads, and Buckner does give it out. Although I don't know if it's Buckner at that time at that end. It's not Buckner, it's the other umpire, and I don't even know who it was. I think it was Constant. Maybe. Was it, who was it at the other end? Do you remember?
No, it was Shepherd. It was
Shepherd.
Aldridge or something.
Okay, anyone, whoever it is, you either get them to give it out or you bowled him, but it's a great delivery. Of course, it's a great delivery. It's a great delivery to play first up. Chris Lewis, of course, he had to play it, although I still feel like a better batsman hota shayad na khelta. But it's a great delivery. I just feel like it's not the best self of the delivery of what that delivery could have been. Aapko wo motivational talks dekhte hain ki you have to be your best self. You have to be the delivery that you want to be, not the delivery that you are. That kind of BS. I just feel like that was not the best delivery that it could be, even though it is a very good delivery. That's what I'm saying. It's like the second child. I love my second child. For the record, I love my second child absolutely, but that's like the second child of those spells.
I really feel we don't want your second child to hear this. But I think like हमारी lost episode is eventually I think what we agreed on was कि in a sense it's like when a band makes or a musician makes like a crazy album and then they follow it up with a deliberately very different kind of album that in isolation is absolutely amazing. A lot of people love, but people who really love the first album find a lot of flaws in the second one, right? Like I'm thinking Radiohead do OK Computer and then they follow that up with K-Day, very sonically different. Kanye does Twisted Fantasy, follows it up with Jesus, which is again goes a very different direction. And it's amazing to see an artist kind of see that, yeah, okay, I just did something that blew everyone's minds, and watch this, I'm going to do something completely different and also blow your minds. And it's just that the first peak might be so high that you're like, has that
So
peak
this is,
been
I
reached?
have a question. I have a simple question related to these things about the albums. And the Arctic Monkeys are also there, by the way, after AM coming out with Tranquility Base, which is totally different. But if that ball to Lewis had been bowled in isolation, so Alan Lamb has not happened before that ball. He just bowls that ball to Chris Lewis. Max situation maybe is the same. How good is that ball to you?
So, like in my mind, I don't feel that I think मैं काफी बड़ा हो गया था जब मैंने realize किया था कि deflection है. मेरे दिमाग में जो analogy है ना, it's kind of like that, and it's not fair, but मेरे दिमाग में analogy is जब VVS Lakshman को शोएब अख्तर out करता है, like I think Lahore or something, where it's just so fast that it hits his pads and hits the wickets, and like Lakshman's kind of makes that what the fuck
Pindi mein
expression
out
that he does. Pindi mein, yeah.
That
so
full toss, right? The full toss ball you're talking about.
Not the full toss ball, like it's a full length ball that kisses like his just the knee pads, and then like it hits the stumps and he's like barely reacted to it. मुझे एक तरीके से मतलब हमेशा वो लगता था कि like Chris Lewis opens up to play a cover drive, and before he can, like, he's still like, oh, what the fuck, and like the ball's already like inside, and the way his body is, I always expected. But in my mind, the trajectory is he would have hit something and hit the wickets anyways. Just like that Lakshman thing, it was so that मतलब इस wicket इस ball पे वो out होना ही था, चाहे वो जैसे भी out. There's a sense in that, which I feel, I guess, अगर आप मुझे शुरू से ये ball हमेशा crazy इतनी लगती है, because वही है कि yeah, there's one thing to be like, oh, ये पहली अच्छी थी दूसरी, and maybe this is like a 15-year-old versus an 8-year-old. Versus the 8-year-old was just like, oh my God, I was fucking crazy. What's he gonna do next? Oh my, like it's just, to me, it's like I can't view it in isolation. Even if I viewed it in isolation, I think I would pretty much loved it. If Chris Lewis was the first wicket. And I think another example I can give is Sachin getting out, right? Like Shoaib Akhtar gets him out on a full toss instead of the perfect Yorker that Dravid gets. But it's
Yes.
like, I don't give a fuck. Like that's the aesthetic may have this problem or that problem, but in that moment to watch that, it just blows your mind. And in fact, abhi, what you are looking for might be just kal raat hi mein dekh raha tha, Shaheen Afridi did in the 100. Pehli ball pe wo swing karke LBW karta hai, and it's like it's a full length ball. And the next one is like a crazy Yorker, which like the guy's foot explodes almost when it hits. And we back to back, I think, I guess you're saying कि एक अच्छी और दूसरी और भी crazy हो या बराबर हो. This kind of maybe the craft goes like this, but it is.
So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to another good friend of ours, Siddharth Monga. I'm gonna just read out his commentary for this delivery, and I think that like it goes against my argument completely, of course.
Yeah.
And my argument is I accept that it is a facetious one and it is a very contrarian one, but I'm going to read out the commentary here. So he's done the lamb delivery. The commentary is, oh, magic, unplayable, too good. The Sarur is getting heavy now, which is typical Monga. What a delivery around the wicket, angling in, pitching middle and off, dipping on him, and then swinging away late, past the outside edge, pegging back the off stump. Then next ball. Is this the game? In 2 balls, Akram has undone the hard work of 13 overs. This time he flicks the shine the other way. Trust Monga to notice that he's flicked the shine the other way. Snakes this in from a mile outside off. Lewis is looking for something similar to Lamb, is perhaps even relieved that this has started wide. But then at that last moment, it starts sneaking back in. Played on. High-class bowling. Okay, so maybe with that kind of Monga-esque detail in there about flicking the shine the other way and it starts off, and Monga has broken it down in typical Monga fashion of how the batter would have seen that ball. It's a good delivery, but I still wish, or on my deathbed, I will say, if I'm asked कि आपको कुछ और जिंदगी में कुछ चाहिए था, तो one thing I will say is कि यार वो lamb ball clean bowled होती, not off the inside edge, और फिर जो hat-trick ball थी, वो वसीम भाई wide ना कराते. That was the other thing. वसीम भाई वो wide ना कराते, hat-trick ले लेते.
नहीं, no ball कराई थी ना. I think that's
no ball. Sorry, no ball थी. Yes.
I feel you mentioned Monga's commentary and we discussed. यहाँ पे हमने काफी दफा मैं I like bringing up film and music when we talk about cricket. Or one of the things with film is कि आपने एक script लिखी है और लोग acting कर रहे हैं, and that is probably the 2 most important components. वही components अभी Hollywood में strike भी कर रहे हैं. But there's that obviously the DP, the kind of everything that's happening in the frames, the lighting and the blocking and the camera movements, etc. And then there's like the costumes, the attention to detail. There is the sound, not just the score, but also sound effects. All of those things combined, and it's not just one person, right? And then in this moment as well, like obviously Wasim Akram is the headline act, and but it's a team game and all of those things. But at the same time, in the commentary box is Richie Benaud, the greatest, I think, commentator. And obviously he has a very different style because it is a very different era. Article commentary is different expectations then. But जो सबसे बेहतरीन चीज बेनौ की मुझे हमेशा लगती थी कि he was like कि देखे जो अपना टीवी पे देख रहा है उसे नजर आ रहा है क्या हो रहा है, उसे सुनाई दे रहा है क्या हो रहा है. तो अगर मैं वही डिस्क्राइब करने लगा वो तो फिर मेरा फायदा क्या है, राइट? सो लाइक आई हैव टू ऐड समथिंग टू दिस. एंड बोथ दीज डिलीवरीज, Richie Benaud is just on fire. So like I was like अभी कल वही मैं जो I was watching some highlights and Ravi Shastri was on, and as soon as like bold hota I go bold, and like I knew that was Ravi Shastri. I didn't even know he was on that. And I get that. I'm into that. But
Yeah.
Beno watches that delivery and he goes left arm round the wicket. Alan Lamb has been cleaned up. Pause. Perhaps so to England, right? Which is, how do you react to something so crazy with this much matlab therao and discipline? And like even in the phrasing of the sentence, he doesn't tell you that it's bold until like halfway through it. And then immediately he's able to contextualize it. It's just brilliant. Or him and Tony Cozier again, just maybe I'm nostalgic or but for me, just all these commentators are fantastic. And Tony Cozier, and this is why another argument into why it doesn't really matter if he plays on or not, because this is the commentary. And it reminds us कि हम लोग अभी जब नासिर से बहुत poorly recorded interview किया था पिछले episode में, thank you to Rizwana who transcribed it. He pointed out कि he felt bad कि for that Kohli wicket, he responded to what Ganguly had said, which made it difficult for somebody cutting the highlights. Ganguly on the commentary had said, how important will that be? He gets out and Nasir replies, not that important, right? And he's like, that makes it very difficult. And I realize that now, because it's hard to find the full 2 deliveries where you truly understand the genius of what Benaud says. Because अब आपको सिर्फ highlight पे वो wicket पे cut हुआ होता है, and you don't get the full thing. The full thing is that as Lewis is walking in, Tony Cozier says, a lot of all-rounders towards the end of their order. Lewis, Reeves, Pringle, De Freitas, they wait. Wasim bowls him out, and then Benno goes, subtract Lewis from that list. Wasim Akram is a hat trick. Like, man.
Genius. Absolute genius. Like
So
timing.
yeah, so that once again, like I see what you're saying. Yeah, like there is a further like जैसे कि what you would call it. Steven Soderbergh and David Fincher are friends, and they were watching a movie together, and like David Fincher pauses it, and he's like, "It's really hard. I don't even know what this technical detail means," but he's like, "Look, the camera is one stop below," which I think he was like the lighting and white balance or something was like minusculely off. And Steven Soderbergh was like, "I'm never watching a movie with you again because it must be exhausting to live life like this." And so I feel like in that Fincher sense, I understand your argument, but you can, it's such a tiny point because everything else is so magnificent. And like Richie Beno in this moment, really, तो वहीं पे है कि, हम कल भी यही बात कर रहे थे कि मॉडर्न गेम में अगर इस पॉइंट पे आपकी 2 विकेट गिरे और आपके पास इतने सारे ऑलराउंडर पड़े हैं और इतना कोई like 7 an over for like 15 overs, like in the modern day this is actually a very easy chase.
Yeah, it's nothing.
I think वो context हुई है कि उस point पे Beno says it both times, like अगर आपकी इस point पे आपके middle order में विकेटें गिर रही हैं, you're expected to lose this. I think until maybe even 7, 8 years ago, if you had to score more than 15 in the final over or 10 in the final over, it was like, oh, no one can beat this. That's changed, because of T20. But in that moment, I think that's another thing to really kind of understand. Yes, they had all those all-rounders, and yes, the asking rate इतनी ज्यादा हाई नहीं थी, मगर जब वसीम अकरम में 2 विकेट लेता है तो सबकी नजरों में, इंग्लैंड की नजरों में, पाकिस्तान की नजरों में,
Game over.
दुनिया की नजरों में मैच खत्म हो चुका था.
And like the best things about those the Benno intervention, especially, Tony Cozier is the perfect straight guy, right? He's setting it up. He's setting up the conversation, and Benno's coming in with his like expertise and all. So it sits, like you said, it sits beautifully on its own as just a highlight, but it's also amazingly perfect as part of the narrative of their conversation that they're having, throughout that moment. मगर Benno की जो पहली ball पे है ना, that the way he says it, left arm round, Anna Lamb's been cleaned up, perhaps so too England. So he's not like, it's not like he's adding a huge amount of insight, right? He's contextualizing amazingly. He's doing it in such a way that मैंने बोल दिया authoritatively. But I've just realized, because you've read it out, the commentary, he's actually giving you the insight. He's telling you that left arm round is an unusual angle at that stage in cricket's development for anyone to be facing. Wasim Akram is the most brilliant exponent of this unusual strategy in cricket. And look what he's done. Like, so he's already putting that, the technical side of it, into context. Left arm, that's all he needs to say. Left arm round, yeah. And everyone knows that yaar, ye isne bahut ek special cheez kari hai. And then to add the lyrical flourish, like, and perhaps so to England, that is just like, it's Australian as well. Like maybe a little bit of glee. England have been cleaned up, maybe. Although I know Benno wasn't that kind of guy, but it's a little bit of glee. And then the addition to Tony Cozier for, subtract Lewis from that list, it's just like inch perfect. Here are all the all-rounders. England have a long batting lineup, but subtract this guy from that list, and unsaid is subtract England's chances from winning this game now, basically, because Wasim Akram is on fire. I know Wasim Akram, I have seen his development, and he's not going to let you win this game, and then like Benno knows, of course, कि Mushtaq bhi hai, Aqib bhi hai, wo log bhi wicket lenge, Aqib will pull off, well, before this, but Aqib has already pulled off one of his greatest catches ever. Abhi Neil Fairbrother out over to another great catch, like Ijaz Ahmed and Ramiz Raja somehow managing to not destroy each other's faces in a collision, running back to take this catch, and Ijaz takes it. और फिर Ramiz is immediately admonishing him कि अरे यार तुम क्या कर रहे थे, मैंने कॉल करी थी, और Ijaz said some Punjabi, I'm sure they must have had some exchange. Then Salim Malik pulling off that throw from the boundary to direct hit, no, not direct hit, but to run out De Freitas or Pringle, one of them. But all of this Benno knows that, but यहाँ पे in dono ballon mein, he's already realized, I think, the significance of this moment. Him and Tony Cozier both, they've realized it, and they're like, okay, now we are in the final stages of this game, the death throes of this game. It is over.
Yeah,
we have to highlight this. And so the way they do it, it's, we've talked about the Amir spell and said how everybody brought their A game, including Rambo, for the cross seam ball, right? The commentary. This was, I think, broadcasting and commentary at absolute peak. Like the union between what was happening and what was being told to us was absolutely like 100%. You cannot better this. You know, Benno
Yeah.
talking over this and Wasim doing what he is doing. That's genius meets genius. You know, game recognizing game or whatever. It's absolutely like inch perfect.
I feel we've done like almost we've like done a lot an hour. We didn't discuss most of the things we discussed last time around, which we was on the legacy of these deliveries, on Wasim's legacy. And I think एक चीज जो मैं यहाँ पे पॉइंट करना चाहूंगा कि इंग्लैंड के पास वनडे क्रिकेट में फर्स्ट मूवर एडवांटेज थी, क्योंकि ये सबसे पहले इनके यहाँ ही इजाद हुई थी और इनकी डोमेस्टिक लीग्स में इनके सारे खिलाड़ी खेलते थे, तो वहां पे ऑब्वियसली लॉट ऑफ और मुल्कों के खिलाड़ियों ने, खासतौर पे पाकिस्तानी ने, वेस्ट इंडियंस वहां खेल के उनकी टीमों को भी बहुत ज्यादा फायदा हुआ, बट ऑब्वियसली इंग्लैंड हैड दैट होल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर एंड दिस वाज द सेकंड कंसेक्यूटिव फाइनल जो ये हार रहे थे, दूसरा लगातार भी था और चार में से तीसरा फाइनल ये हार रहे थे, राइट? सो लाइक 79, 87 एंड
Yeah.
92.
Yeah.
एंड फ्रॉम दिस मोमेंट 23 साल तक इंग्लैंड की व्हाइट बॉल टीम तबाह, लाइक ये लाइक दिस वाजंट कि परहैप्स सो टू इंग्लैंड जब ये कह रहा है तो किसी को भी अंदाजा नहीं था कि ये इंग्लैंड का मैच में नहीं खत्म हो रहा है, ये इंग्लैंड की एक या दो जनरेशंस के लिए
खत्म हो
वसीम
रही है.
जेंगिस खान जाके वो क्या कहते हैं कि लाइक देयर पार्ट्स ऑफ द वर्ल्ड वेयर द क्लाइमेट, the temperature changed because Genghis Khan had killed so many people that like literally there weren't enough humans there to create the levels of heat that they were before. Or you know, like the Romans would defeat you in battle and then like literally salted the Carthage जो था, मतलब उस तरीके से वसीम अकरम ने उन्हें दफनाया था कि बेटा अब लाइक यू नो 23 साल तक तुम्हारी टीम अच्छी नहीं हुई, लाइक
तुम
नहीं
कुछ
नॉट
नहीं
इवन
करोगे.
23 इज रॉन्ग, 19 में आए थे ना, तो दैट्स 27.
27 साल, yeah. Actually, even longer, nearly 30 years, basically.
Jeez, like that was the
30 साल
impact that
दफना दिया वसीम
those
भाई
two
ने.
deliveries had. He just was just like, you're gone, like never come back.
And you know, then like, but his own legacy
Yeah.
is kind of slightly, I don't know what it is. So like you, and I feel like you did a great job of summing up in the Lost episode, the bootleg episode. But I think it was something we basically said that I think his greatness kind of has cushioned him from total cancellation, right? I think
Yeah.
that's generally the point that we agreed on, was that whatever happened, so, you know, Qayyum report came, he was heavily implicated in it, although, like, you know, he was heavily implicated, but in as much as that report could do. And the segue here is that I feel like the Qayyum report is actually like a masterly piece of work in that, you know, बहुत ही limited hard evidence था, but there was a lot of speculation and substantial speculation, and, you know, like speculation that you could not ignore. There was that, there was hearsay, there was testimony, there was spoken testimony, which again, you know, didn't have the value of evidence as such, but there was so much of it there that he had to find a line somewhere, Justice Qayyum. And he found this line of like kind of punishing them, but also not tangawing them. At least guys like Wasim, you know, Salim Malik finished career was ended. And I think that made sense because there was a lot more against Wasim, against Salim than Wasim Akram. But that report kind of captured perfectly the kind of left them hanging between. It was almost like a purgatory, right? They were left hanging between being complete gods and being complete criminals or whatever. And you know, it's kind of how like life is. But I don't think, like, over the course of time, after especially, you know, Justice Karim himself said that I had a soft spot for Wasim Akram, when he later said in an interview that that's maybe why I didn't punish him. You know, Tawqir Zia, the chairman of the PCB at the time, did want to. He wanted to go all out and just, you know, hang them all, effectively, metaphorically hang them all. Wasim jo bhi ho, Wasim ho, Waqar ho, Inzamam ho, sabko tangana cha rahe the, General Zia. And he was advised by several people that no, look, we have to be a little bit more pragmatic about this because these guys are big figures. And, you know, in Pakistan, you perhaps don't get a bigger celebrity and public figure than a cricketer, than a top class cricketer, right? So they had to really tread with a little bit of caution And so I think Justice Sayum kind of captured that in his report. And then when he spoke afterwards and said that I had a soft spot for Wasim, I feel like he actually spoke for pretty much the entire country. And generations upon generations who all were like, yes, Wasim Akram may have had his integrity questioned and may have been involved, but he is Wasim Akram, the greatest clutch player we have known, the greatest player that Pakistan has known, the greatest bowler, one of the greatest bowlers the world has known, and actually at heart, a really endearing and warm and non-malicious personality. It has to be said. He has grown over time into like being just a not a malicious guy, not bitter, not hung up on his own career. And so I think that has kind of worked in saving him from being completely cancelled. In fact, not just not being cancelled, but actually still thriving, I would say, right? As a post-cricket career.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that I was thinking about is कि 90s में वही जब मैं बात कर रहा हूँ ना कि अगर मैं 8 साल का हूँ, I think in that moment Pakistan wins the World Cup, so that cricket straight away became one of those defining things for someone like me growing up in Karachi in like relative privilege. And at the same time जो Pakistani pop music like and Vital Signs and Strings and NTM music channel charts, etc. It was a big time for like that as well. And so you had like basically two types of rock stars for someone like me. You had the cricketers, and then you had like the actual rock stars. And these are both really huge figures. And by the end of the 90s, the music industry is decimated क्योंकि पाकिस्तान में अब सब लोग पहले फिर एक चैनल था, दूसरा चैनल आया, उस पे म्यूजिक आती थी और पीटीवी पे भी फिर ज्यादा आने लगी एक्सेट्रा एक्सेट्रा. एंड देन एकदम से केबल टीवी डिश एंटेना बेसिकली पहले हर जगह नहीं, but at least like middle classes were able to afford it. They had a whole bunch of Indian channels, the local channel kind of completely created, which created the music scene as well. और उस point पे almost like a lot of musicians either left, but a lot of them also, either briefly, yeah, full time, became a lot more outwardly religious, right? और वही चीज आपको क्रिकेट के साथ हुई कि क्रिकेट के सारे रॉक स्टार्स के ऊपर ये फिक्सिंग इल्जामात आते रहे. और उसके बाद ऑलमोस्ट ऑल ऑफ देम वेंट टू दैट फेज जहाँ पे काफी सारे उसको उनकी जिंदगी उस तरफ से बदल गई, बट लाइक वही कि सबकी religiosity जिसको हम कहेंगे वो ज्यादा वाजे होने लगी. Wasim, as I said, was like he had a very different South Asian cliche. Instead of turning religious in his middle age, he became diabetic in his middle age. But I think that was one of those things I often thought about. Is this like there was with the musicians, there were all these different pressures from society. ये करना सही है, गलत है, ये है, वो है. With the cricketers, they had actually far more serious crimes, which was like the fixing, etc. But from a kid lacking that kind of nuance, it just felt like, oh, everyone's out after my heroes, and then you kind of feel, that in a sense, like the changes they made felt like कि वो admit कर रहे हैं कि हाँ हमने कुछ गलत किया था और that's why हम ये अब बदल रहे हैं. So whatever you supported them for was actually wrong. And I always found that Wasim kind of avoids that trajectory. B, what I found interesting is कि दुनिया भर में people kind of accepted that हाँ ठीक है fixing जो कुछ भी था, but like he's invited to all like the big kind of ICC events, or like in England or in Australia or in India, like the three biggest markets. He is box office. I mean, let's be clear, Wasim Akram as a sports analyst and commentator is terrible, and he rightfully gets made fun of. But as a presence, as just being having that star power, he's clearly extremely attractive to all these different people. And we were talking about in Pakistan, probably remains, along with Afridi, like the biggest brand ambassador, which is remarkable given कि इसको कोई 20-25 साल हो गए retire किए हुए, right? So like, um, there are people with kids now who really have barely watched him bowl, and yet he's still selling those Ariel detergents and stuff like that. And so it's kind of remarkable that वो जो इतना बड़ा एक पीरियड ऑफ क्राइसिस था पाकिस्तानी पॉप कल्चर के इन दो पिलर्स में, and seemed to affect everyone, and everyone seemed to get judged by it. Like Wasim obviously it took a toll on him. He talks about like diabetes was a result of the stress he faced. Magar, the point was, yeah, he emerges from that to this day with like a pretty, he's forgiven, if not the sins also forgotten. जिनको याद भी है वो भी मतलब like yes, I think अभी भी पाकिस्तान में लोग ट्रोल श्रोल कर रहे हैं और हमारी media has that very antagonistic approach to everyone, but even there like people are very wary of kind of going after him because he just has so much goodwill otherwise, and that is I think one of the most remarkable things about him. And I think कि वो अब हम डिस्कस करने लगे तो हम वैसी 2 घंटे की पॉडकास्ट कर चुके हैं और भी करनी पड़ेगी. But I think, yeah, I think that was important to acknowledge.
Yeah, and also like you were talking about the trajectory that he did not take the trajectory that other guys took. It's in itself is remarkable because as he explains in his book, right, that he came from a fairly humble, I guess, in a background in the sense that it was a troubled background. The parents split. I never knew about this, but his parents split at an early age. They used to live in Model Town in Lahore. Then they moved to Andruni Shahar, and he lived with his
To Mazang.
Yes, to Mazang, sorry. And he lived in his mother's kind of side of the family. We grew up with them and all. He, acknowledges himself as a Pendu. He says that when I meet my old friends from that time, they still call me a Pendu. And but he went through this remarkable transformation when he was growing older as a cricketer, just after Imran had retired. And he always sought mentors, I think. Wasim ki ek cheez thi that he always needed some kind of guiding light or mentor to respond to. And I think Homa, his wife who passed away sadly, she played a huge role in that. And there was this interview that he gave just after the first rebellion against his captaincy had happened in 92, 93. He gave this interview in 93, 94, which I got hold of thanks to Kamran Vasti, who, if you know, he has like everything in the world ever on cricket from everywhere. He conjures up these things. So he gave this interview, amazing interview, which I saw in the Pakistani Cricketer, in which he talked about coping with and being vulnerable and coping with what had happened to him with the team. All these young guys who were his best friends, were his life, suddenly betraying him. And he was coming to terms with that. And, he used Huma a lot. Huma, who was a psychoanalyst, so he spoke to her a lot, almost as a patient. And I think that, Huma's influence that way really helped him develop as a person. Where Imran couldn't take over post his retirement because Imran got busy with other stuff, I think Huma really helped shape the kind of person that he became, which is to say that he transcended his own kind of background and where it come from and his career at that stage. And it helped him take stock of his life and become the guy that we see now. He's very worldly. He's at home in England, in Australia, which is a home for him now, in Pakistan. He can move easily between these countries, just being Wasim Akram.
I mean, I think like one of the last signs of India's the fascism can't be stopped was when like they stopped allowing Wasim. Because like otherwise they were like बाकी सब ban है सब कुछ ये वसीम भाई काफी इंडिया में फिर रहे हैं.
And he became, Wasim became almost like and this is maybe the note where we end, is he's almost become like this Imran kind of figure. If you think of Imran just before he became a massive politician, carrying a lot of goodwill about him and a figure who is recognizable anywhere he goes in the world, who different communities, different countries all acknowledge him. And that that bad will or that polarization from becoming a politician hasn't come in yet. And I don't think Wasim will ever entertain the notion of politics, but he's become, from having gone to be like Imran's understudy, the guy who's going to replace Imran, to being his own kind of genius. I think he's now become a like pre-big politics Imran kind of figure, in that he's universally pretty much loved. I think he doesn't think that he's loved as much as he is, which is why the book has come out. I think it's like a kind of, putting his own story out there as legacy, but also as defense and validation or whatever. But I think if you look at it and, his commercial work, his commentary work, all of it proves that he is still as beloved as he was when, he was at his peak as a player.
Yeah, no, on a personal level, I can definitely vouch for that. We've gone way over time on this, but
For the second time.
It's such a unknown, और इसके बारे में कोई बात ही नहीं करता है स्पेल की, तो हमने सोचा कि क्यों ना हम थोड़ा सा
We'll
ज्यादा
shed some light
टाइम
on it.
डालें और तफसील से बात करें। हाँ, कि माशाल्लाह से वसीम अकरम ने भी एक दफा फाइनल में 3 विकेटें ली थी, 2 लगातार बॉलों पे ली थी।
सिर्फ 3?
10 या बकवास। खैर, तो but anyways, this was a lot of fun, Usman. Thank you so much. And thank you to Siggy also, who जो 2 दिन से बर्दाश्त कर रही है सब कुछ।
Kept quiet. I did not hear Siggy even once in this
Yeah,
episode.
Siggy was pissed before we started, but you know he's
Siggy had,
been.
by the way, for those who look out for these kind of things, Siggy played this podcast backwards as a message to other cats, the original bootleg podcast. So if you find that, Siggy has played that backwards as a message to all cats, and it's some kind
Yeah.
of subliminal message that we don't know what it is, but Siggy's done that to the first podcast.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, and we'll catch you hopefully soon, hopefully more regularly. Bye.
एकदम इन्होंने वक्त बदल दिया, जज्बात बदल दिए, जिंदगी